Thank you for taking time to talk to me today. I really appreciate it. I'm very excited to talk about, like, you've had a very good year.
It has been it was a busy past year and a half.
Um, like you helped score They Cloned Tyrone, which has been a big hit. And like a personal favorite for me, just in terms of that film, as well as the forthcoming Story Avenue. Um, like what's it been like getting to do like these really fantastically like varied but also high profile projects?
Yeah, I mean, it's been such a blessing to work with really talented and just visionary directors for starts. Tyrone Joel Taylor, he has such a vivid mind, and he had such great direction, in terms of what he wanted musically, and wrapping up that film and then also doing Story Ave at the same time was a lot of fun because I got to put on very different hats at once. At the same time, I was also working on Patricia Arquette's directorial debut called Gonzo Girl, which just premiered at TIFF this year, and that was also musically just in a whole different world than those two films as well. And it was a lot of fun just getting to wear different hats and work with such talented directors. Um, and also with Tyrone, especially getting to work with another great composer, and coming in, that job was unique because the film was almost already finished in terms of post production when I came onto that project to help finish scoring it. um, and Story Ave was very sort of organic sort of beginning. When I started working on that, I was reading the script and there at the beginning of post production, and for the music side at least. And so it was two different worlds, and both were each unique and presented a lot of fun.
Well, I mean, like that seems to be like very much a part of your career, is that you have gotten to work on a lot of projects that have like very like are set in very specific times and places. Like, is that challenging, or is that like a really great direction and able that you're able to head into, because like you're working like, it's very specifically of this place and time, whether it be They Clone Tyrone or Story Ave?
Yeah, I mean, I would, I'd harken back to my training, especially when it comes to writing in different time periods and writing in different styles, because I spent 3.5 years in Chris Bauer's studio, doing additional writing for him, and we're working on stuff like Bridgerton, and then Mrs. America, and Space Jam, and When They See Us, and everything, like especially Mrs. America, When They See Us, and Bridgerton. That's Bridgerton's fictitious, but like all three of those took place in a drastically different time period. You've got like Bridgerton, which is like the early 1800s period piece, um and then Mrs. America, which is like early 70s, and then When They See Us, which is mid 90s, and then Space Jam, which is like we're not only pulling from Looney Tune sound, but also like using modern day production techniques. And so when I opened up my own studio, and I was no longer Chris's assistant, I felt like I had a lot of that training ready to go. I felt prepared for that opportunity to just like I mentioned earlier, just wearing different hats. And it's always a challenge. There's always a challenge in making a score great. It's not really easy work, but when you're properly prepared, you can take on that challenge and really deliver.
Well, but I mean, I assume it's got to be a whole lot of fun for you to be able to like work in these different time periods and things like that. Like, especially considering like you've worked on so many projects that like just have just a slew of needle drops in them, which, I from the various composers I've talked to, like that can be both a blessing and a curse.
Yeah, I mean, what's fun with working on needle drops is like you just get to it feels like you get to be a part of the cabaret, and for lack of a better term, it's like you get to, especially when needle drops are coming in right before your score, it feels like you're part of the action when it comes to being a part of the quote unquote fun needle drops. um and especially a show like Inventing Anna, which had like so many needle drops. A lot of I had Alexandra Patsava, she did a great job, really curating great tracks for that show, which really embodied the characters and the setting and the sort of craziness of that storyline. So it was fun, like getting to interweave my cues with the needle drops.
I haven't had a chance to see Story Ave yet, but I have gotten to listen to your score. And based on what I know of the film, like it walks this very fine line between being very sort of sad and melancholy, but also like embodying the hope that's in the main character's story. Like, was that what you were aiming for? Am I hearing it correctly?
Yeah, a lot of this, the whole theme of this story is hope and identity and finding and coming of age and finding oneself. And we what I what I admire about Aristotle's genius is that he wanted to, obviously, like, this film is taking place in the Bronx, and it's got like this sort of like, you know mid 90s coming of age, sort of almost like a Spike Lee type feel to it. But he really wanted to sort of distinguish and make this film unique in the sense that we're going to bring in, you know, a more classically driven orchestral based score, um, for these Black and Latino characters. And and with that score, we wanted to bring in this. Like, I remember the first thing that Aristotle said in one of our early meetings was, I want this score to evoke emotion. I don't want it to be a boom bap type, New York type, score. I want this to evoke a lot of emotion and a lot of hope. And so that was one of the early directions I got, and I went with a lot of cello and ambient sort of strings, and putting a lot of reverb and pads and working that into the orchestration, and making the score sound as hopeful and moving as I could.
You have gotten to work on some other coming of age stories that are very different, such as Euphoria. Um, and I like just that you are not like limited to a single genre, like, which is one of the things I find amazing, because like I just have to imagine that it's so much fun for you to go from like a series to a movie to like documentary type work and things like that. Like, how does that like where does your approach start for any given project, given that you are working in so many different milieus?
Yeah, I mean, the approach I keep pretty constant because I don't like to change my approach to TV and film, and at least in terms of how I think of writing. Because I also want to I like how TV is becoming a bit more cinematic, a lot more cinematic, and I also want to help contribute to that. But the first thing I always do is I study the characters, I read a script, even if it's a TV series, and I start developing themes. I'm sure countless other composers do the same thing, but I start developing themes and um, you know using, sort of coming up with a palette in which I can just paint the entire show or film with. So my process doesn't really change. What I do like about flipping back and forth is, like, you know, oftentimes the TV show I'm working on is just thematically different than the film that I'm working on. So it's just fun to like go like change the scenery every now and then. That's the most fun thing about the job, is it's just changing scenes. And for someone like me who, likes, like, I like change. I like to see different things and do different things, and I have all these different hobbies. I like to incorporate that into my work as well when I get to work on different projects that are moving around.
What kind of hobbies do you have that allow you to like integrate those into your work?
Yeah, so I mean, I love to scuba dive. My girlfriend and I, we got scuba certified earlier this year, and we've now done about like 25 to 27 dives. And then I'm a really big skier. So it's kind of like when you think about a TV show and a film that are two different things, like it's like my hobbies are just wildly different. I mean, I'm like at the top of a mountain or at the, 100 feet under the ocean. So I also, I also like to incorporate, the sort of practices that I've learned in scuba diving into my music, which is, there's certain procedures and protocols when scuba diving so you don't die. And there's certain procedures and protocols when juggling three different projects at once as a film composer so you don't metaphorically die. You don't get swamped in work and lose deadlines and stuff like that. So I think I think there's like a cool dance that's going on between my hobbies and scoring.
I love the idea, like both of those are hobbies that to me also have like definite like sounds that go with them. Like there's that murky underwater sound and the way that, being
Yeah.
underwater changes the way sound goes. And just the sort of skiing and the sound of snow and I love the fact that like kind of as a composer it's like a thing where it's very similar to composing where you're working with other people like when you're diving or skiing to like make sure that you can do all of this properly but in the end you are kind of on your own.
Yeah, I mean, well, in scuba diving, you're never skiing. You're kind of on your own, but in scuba diving, you are really working with at least all the time one other person, if not three to four. Um, but yeah, they each like with Story Ave score, for example, I did have this, and this is before I even got scuba certified, but I did have this idea of like this fishbowl that Kadir, the main character, is sort of trapped in, and um, and he's sort of like kind of floating through water. You'll see in the film that you know, drowning is in as a way of death is actually a theme in this movie. And a lot of the ways I approached the score was to kind of get this like ethereal underwater sound, especially with the way I EQ'd some of the violins, and then making them sound a bit more murky, and then it sort of opens up, and then adding a bunch of reverb. Um, Kadir's sort of trapped in this fishbowl, which is his neighborhood and his life that he has, and this whole finding of his identity is leaving that fishbowl and sort of been breaking out. So yeah, there's definitely some underwater themes going on.
Do you have like an instrument that you like to start your work on, or do you work like because I know some folks just like work by writing and other folks like have like they go to guitar or they go to piano. What is it for you?
Yeah, I mean, I typically go to the piano, either behind me or I'm just too lazy to swivel over, so I just do it right here on my keyboard. um, but yeah, piano's my main instrument. I went to school for jazz piano. I got my master's in jazz piano, so that's always the first medium in which I imagine notes coming across um, the page is by way of the piano. Also, it's very easy to like orchestrate on the piano, because you've got 10 fingers and you can fill up, you can assign a note for every finger. So it's easy to really visualize a score on the piano for me when I have, a whole chord in the left hand and a whole chord with a melody in the right hand. Um, and then I'll move that over to the into my digital audio workstation, and then I'll sort of expand that out into the rest of the orchestra.
Well, I guess that makes a lot of sense to me, like given that you are from New Orleans, and I know like a lot of people think of New Orleans and that they think of that sound and they think of the brass band, but like for whatever reason, for me, like I go to like the sounds of like Professor Longhair or Dr. John, and just like that piano sound to me is like when I think New Orleans, I just hear like Big Chief start playing in the back of my head.
Yeah, I'm actually from Wisconsin. My dad is from New Orleans. He's from the lower Ninth Ward. So I grew up in and around New Orleans all my life, and I grew up listening to like the Preservation Hall jazz band on recording, and I would Ellis Marcellus was one of my early mentors on piano. Um, and I a lot of my musical DNA comes from New Orleans, and I think that's where I also get a lot of my love and desire to play jazz. But there's also there's my mom, her heritage is Macedonian and also Scots Irish by way of like Eastern Kentucky and Northern Kentucky. And so I grew up listening to like, you know, Patsy Cline and, Loretta Lynn and also jazz. So I've always had these like two different worlds musically that have both, inspired me. And, that's why I love to use guitar when I can in scores and, as well as, trumpet, with a harmony in it. For if we want to use Story Ave as an example, I love to tap into those upbringings.
It's really wonderful. I always love like hearing from anybody, like any musician, about like the music they grew up on and like what it does to you, like at like a molecular level, it almost seems.
Mhm.
Pierre, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to me about Story Ave and all of your work. Do you have anything coming up that you can talk about?
Yeah, I'm right now I'm scoring a short comedy series called Clean Slate, and it's going to be on Amazon Freevee. It's starring George Wallace, who's playing the character Harry Slate in the TV series, and then Laverne Cox is the lead. And it's a fun one. This is actually the first comedy series I've solo scored. And yeah, look out for it. It's gonna be on Amazon Freevee sometime in the next year.
Wonderful. Well, again, Pierre, thank you so much for taking time to talk to me, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate
You're
it.
welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.